guys, and welcome to another episode of the Khoola Biz Lounge podcast. My name is Bongani Mzobe, your host for that platform that decodes entrepreneurship and helps you in your journey as you chase your bag. We don't know what your bag is. We don't know what your business is. But one thing that we know, there is a formula to getting it right. Today is one of those shows where we take a bit of a twist in what we deliver on this episode. We host a business class focused on 3 content pieces that we found to be inspiring, educational, and motivational, and would really help every entrepreneur identify the formula before getting it right. I know that a lot of entrepreneurs focus their energies on finding the sale, getting the customer, closing the deal. And not a lot of times do we focus on understanding the process, understanding the end goal, and where do we want to go as entrepreneurs. Our business class today focuses on key elements that shape the character of the entrepreneur to become the greatest at what they do and shape the world with good leadership and solutions that solve people's problems. Today we take a lesson from the Harvard Business School in a business class conducted by Professor of Business Administration Tistel Neely, who's schooling us about the importance to take a stand and provide decisive leadership when situation calls for it. I'm not going to waste your time. Let's go.
Today, we put ourselves in the shoes of Cynthia Carroll. Imagine you've become CEO of one of the world's largest mining companies, Anglo-American. $25 billion in sales, 162,000 employees, 2/3 of them in South Africa. And 4 months into your job, you hear the news. One of the miners in Rustenburg has lost his life. Yet another fatality. You have to decide, are you going to shut down the mine or continue business as usual? David, if you can open for us today. You're Cynthia Carroll. The news comes to you. Do you shut down the mine in Rustenburg? Yes or no? What are you going to do?
So I think she needs to initiate very detailed investigations into what happened in these circumstances and then what has happened throughout the past.
Are you going to shut down or not shut down?
So I'm going to do a detailed investigation. And then when I do have a plan...
What are you learning? What are you learning in this investigation?
Practices that are not being followed correctly or out of line or could be safer, where there's issues.
People are dying. It's not safe. What evidence are you looking for?
When you get the opportunity to participate, you need to be able to compact the information that you're going to present in a very concise and clear manner. Through participation in class every day, this is something that I am trying to sharpen.
Who wants to get in on this?
It's dynamic, it's fast-paced, there's a ton of energy. Everyone's really excited to jump in and contribute.
I learn a lot from my peers as much as I learn from the faculty, if not more. The professor kind of facilitates. It's like an orchestra. They kind of direct the music, but they're not necessarily playing it.
Izosa.
I think we need to shut it down. Minor deaths are accepted as just a part of the process of mining. Shutting down the operation would signal a very strong mentality shift that deaths aren't going to be tolerated.
That's called a bold stroke, by the way. What Grant is talking about, what Izosa is talking about, what Robert is talking about is a bold stroke, which means from this day forward, something has shifted. But those of you who disagree, say what? Those of you who disagree, say what will?
I think we do much more if we improve the culture around safety in the entire organization.
There's some truth that we're trying to work toward. The debates become more and more fun because that's when you get to uncover views that you hadn't thought of, and when you get to push your own thinking and hopefully make your own thinking much, much better.
If you allow your perspective to be constructively challenged by other people, then it is just fascinating how, your position and your perspective can shift.
Those of you who want to shut down, how do you respond to this? Layla.
We shut down the plant because we had safety issues, and we made a stand, and we started making a safety culture, like we had a safety. The fact that we can have difficult, uncomfortable conversations, we can talk about race, we can talk about politics, and still be friends at the end of the day. And to have people who are not from a specific group, but still have sympathy and empathy is pretty unique.
Beyond cultural and beyond structural, we also talk about just the people of the organization. The overseers are generally white and the workers are generally black. The language with which they communicate is called Finagalo, and it's largely a command and control language.
So you're saying some structural, you're saying some linguistic communication barriers, you're saying some organization cultural issues around the entire organization.
I think the case method also gives you humility. Your perspective is not enough to figure out the answer to a question, and actually gives you the ability to ask other people what their perspective is.
So there's 27 countries represented in our section of 94 people, and because of the way that the case method is structured, we can sort of get underneath what are those differences really tied to. Are there cultural things about where you come from that makes the business world operate slightly differently? And are there things that we can learn from those differences?
I think consumers are critical here. So not only do they care about having high quality inputs to their supply chains on time, but they will also care about safety.
In the first month or couple weeks of class, I was hesitant to participate, but over time, I've gotten rid of all of my barriers and don't really have any qualms about participating. But a lot of that is because of the support of my classmates. And not only do I see it changing in myself, but I see my classmates making better points over time, which then also, again, pushes me to be better.
Stakeholder analysis is so important when we think about change. So important to do. We think about who do we need to worry about and what do they care about? What are their interests? And so you start there, but that's not enough. You have to then say, where do I need to invest the most time? Who is in this cell? The board.
I'm really worried about the managers.
I think the government's also key in here because
being in the case setting, you realize how valuable everyone else around you is and how valuable their opinions are, and the importance of being a really good active listener.
So before we shift from this and think about some action planning, I just want to show of hand, because it's not clear to me in this room, how many of you are shutting down? Really? And how many of you are not shutting down? So most of you are not shutting down. Wow. So are we going to resolve this now, or are there points that we need to make?
I don't know if I think this is a performance gap. I don't know if this is about best practices. To me, this is about culture. If all these minors were white and not black, I think the death rates would look very, very differently, because I think people would consider the value of the lives of the people in the mine very differently. The question we have to ask is this company extracting more value from the community than it's providing?
It's scary to be vulnerable in a working world, so you're oftentimes taught to put up a shield. But here, you're given an environment that supports you to take those risks and actually celebrates failures or celebrates diversity of thought when you don't agree with someone.
Jumping into the arena, using your brain to come to the best hypothesis and conclusion that you can given the data that you have, is a task that leaders have to do every day. And how do you use limited information to make a decision and do that in a way that forces you to flex that muscle of dealing with ambiguity?
They don't get it. Jake.
Yeah, and dragging it back up from the front line to the CEO position, one of the things that I was thinking about is not just all of these different elements that we should be considering in terms of safety, but also the leadership capability of Cynthia herself. You reliably took positions at your previous company that were incredibly unpopular and encountered all sorts of resistance. And I think this is a case where you've shown that you could do it, and so I would shut down the company.
The situation is different, don't you think? Is she suited for this job? Can she do this?
I think that's an incredibly challenging question.
That's what we do, Jake. This is what we do. push students to take a position or to take a stand because it forces students to think deeply, to think about risks, to think about the weaknesses in their ideas, and to also be open to influence. I want them to set high standards for themselves. I want them to be challenged. I want them to challenge others.
So what initially brought me here was that I wanted to complement the skills that I've developed in architecture and consulting with business skills. But once I got here, those priorities completely changed. What inspires me now is really the having super engaging discussions with my peers. I don't think that I've ever been that intellectually stimulated on a day-to-day basis as I am here. And I think for me, that's inspiring, and it just wakes me up every day with excitement. I think I recognized that I wasn't pushing myself to think differently or to lead differently. I wasn't going to do anything extraordinary. And I thought maybe if I came here, I would be pushed in a way that would lead me to develop into someone who could change something. At HBS, there's just no one here who wants to come out the same way they came in. And that's really exciting.
30 years ago, Cynthia Carroll, 30 years ago, was actually in your seats, in these exact same seats. And because of her, thousands and thousands of miners in the world are paid better, are much safer, and are leading better lives with much more dignity. One day, not only that could be you, I know that one day it will be you.
Wow, insightful, isn't it? Also, I think, such a business class setting would really push any entrepreneur to be a broad thinker, simply because you're in a room filled with so many great minds that are tackling the problem from every angle possible. And that environment alone just broadens your horizon and shapes you into a great thinker. Please do follow us on our social media platforms. We are at Khoola Biz on every platform you can think about. Also, do make a comment if you did take a lesson from this content piece. Oh, wait, there's another one. We are going into a content piece. It's an F&B business leadership series produced by MoneyWeb and AdLib. This is a great man, someone I've got great respect for, Mr. Sipho Nkosi, former Exaro Resources CEO, who is schooling us on the importance to provide, strong business leadership, even when circumstances around you are not favorable. Finding those people to inspire you, finding that reason to say, this is why I started, and for this reason, I will not stop. And finding those small things that will become your fueling oil to keep you going. Join me as I take great lessons from this leader. I know you will too.
Business generally is not easy. You get into business because there are certain things that drive you. Some of those things would be, I want to make money. Sometimes you get into business because you just want to make a statement. But by and large, people get into business because they want to make money. But it's never an easy journey. Historically, if you go back in history in terms of where we were as black people, there are things that you could do, there are things that you could not do. I went through schooling, funny enough, in Ngandla, and it was a church school, a Dutch Reformed church school, where I did my basic schooling, and then I moved to the Lutheran Church School, where I did another schooling there. So all those things, it just formed the basis of my life. But at the time, I knew that there were limits in terms of what I could do that were defined by the law. Some of them, for instance, there are certain professions that I couldn't venture into. In the area where we were, there are certain subjects that I couldn't study, mathematics and science being one of them. And it's funny, when I even passed my matric without doing mathematics and science. But what did I do? I did alchemie en rekenkunde, I did landbouw, and I did very many others, but were done in Afrikaans at the time, because we had to do that one in Afrikaans. That's how it was determined. So once I got to university and I decided to do a BCom, fortunately the university had designed a course that will delay you for the full year whilst you're just doing maths. We call it Maths Zero, which is anything that you could have learned before you before you passed matric. So that enabled me to do whatever I did and pass my degrees. So in terms of leadership, I think people who stood up for me would be my father, who in the face of, because my father was an evangelist, in the face of all the pain and of that time and the way he was treated by other people, he could stand up and say, you know what, I'm not here for people, but I'm here for the bigger calling. It's not about me, it's not about this person, it's about who sent me here. So if a person could withstand those kinds of things, I just felt that, this is really amazing. The second thing that I pick up in terms of leadership would be my brothers. In our household, the first person who did a matric was my elder brother. And I didn't know anything about matric. And then I realized, there is a matric, so I'm going to aspire to pass my matric. Then one of my brothers went on and did a law degree. And I said, there's a university, so I'll be at the university. So if those people never took steps to do whatever they were doing, I would not have known anything about that. There are others as well. I mean, there were people like, in the 50s and the 60s, early 60s, people like Sixthrit Bengu in Gandla, who was there. He ended up on Robben Island at some point. And he started teaching my brothers and all of us about the challenges of the life that we're living. And then you realize that the life that we were living was quite abnormal, was not the real life. And then you started thinking about ways and means of living differently to what you were confined to and what you were taught. One of the things that were interesting for me was in 1961, when the Republic of South Africa was formed. We were given, as young 6-year-old kids, given medals to put on here, and we were given coins and everything, and we were singing songs of the Republic, and I didn't know anything about that, what it meant. But I remember we were going to a picnic to celebrate that, because all schools were to do that. So as we were walking towards the picnic place, we were beaten up by a group of men who said, how could you celebrate this thing? And I mean, that confused the hell out of me, because I didn't even know what was happening in the country. But if you took all those things and put them all together, they played a key role in terms of forming me and making me a person who I am. But of course, as I grew older and using those experiences, people like Steve Biko and their pronouncements, they played a key role. But there was always this big hope that there's this man and his team who are sitting in prison, and this is Nelson. One day he will come out. And that gave us that hope of leadership, that one day someone is going to come out and deal with the old issues that we have. So leadership really became a constant. It was not an event, but it just happened over a period of time. As you learn certain things, as you embrace certain things, then your eyes opened up to the fact that I can do something, I can be somebody, I can make a contribution to the country. I got retrenched in 1984. And there were many reasons for that. I mean, but one of them was there was so much economic pressure on South Africa for American companies, for foreign companies to divest out of South Africa. And one of them was Ford. And I worked for Ford, and Ford had to leave the country, and therefore I got retrenched as a result of that. And I was out of a job for about 8 months or so trying to look for a job, and I couldn't find a job, and I was flying all over the country trying to secure a place for myself. It was the most traumatic time in the sense that as a black graduate, everyone looked up to you, and they thought that once you've gotten some education, you're made. And here's a person we thought he was made. He's made, but he's not. He's just down and out. But you know what? I forgot that I had made some application 2 years before to go to the US, and I had totally forgotten about that. And I had done some interviews on that, and lo and behold, I get a telex. Hey, you should be in the US. Why are you still in South Africa? So I ended up in Boston. It's a fantastic city. I don't know how many universities are there, and you could walk from one library to the other and learn as much as possible. But what was very good for me at the time, there were two things. One, the protest movement was very strong, and therefore, being South African, you were called upon to go and participate and talk to schools and talk to everyone and talk to churches and talk to even synagogues. You had to go and do the work. Why synagogues? What was very interesting is that in Russia at the time, there were lots of Jews that were sitting there, and they were trying to get them out of Russia, and they were called refuseniks at the time. So you ended up collaborating with all other nations in terms of freeing South Africa, freeing all other countries, and it became a movement. So I got sucked into that one, which was really cool, and I learned a lot out of that as an individual. But Boston provided me with an opportunity to do other things, like, for instance, I ended up doing yachting, even though I don't even know how to do it today, but it was a course that I had to do. I ended up enhancing my music knowledge by participating, even though I was doing an MBA, but I ended up doing quite a few of those things. And lo and behold, I was recruited by Anglo to join their coal division, and I ended up in Johannesburg working here in 1986. When I joined Anglo, it was the time when a lot of black people were introduced into bigger corporates to do a few things. And I was brought in on the marketing side to participate there. But there are lessons that I learned there. There was a guy who was my director, James Campbell is the guy. James Campbell was a very tough human being, but he taught me quite a lot. Like, for instance, there was a time when I got in and I was working, and one of my seniors took sick, and I stepped in and I did his job, and I did it well, I thought. And I came, and eventually after 6 months, he came back, and of course I'm excited. I go to him, this is what I've been doing, I'm excited. And James called me and I said, you know what? People like you don't make it at Anglo. I said, why? It's because I think you abdicated your responsibility. What did I do wrong? He said, you should have said to this gentleman, sir, now that you're back, please go to James. He will give you your job. This is now my job. I learned for the first time that once you've got something, make sure you make the best out of it. And if you occupy a space, don't occupy it and then give it away and all those kinds of things. Those were smaller lessons, but I found them very, very useful into the future. And he taught me quite a lot. I mean, Anglo taught me a lot in terms of the business, taught me a lot in terms of the mining sector, coal and all of the others. And that was very, very important to me. Even when I went to work for Genco, that is Transnatal, which became Ingo, became Billiton, I used that knowledge that I had picked up from Anglo because I got a good foundation insofar as that one is concerned. So people like James played a key role in my life, but there were people who were larger than life in the mining industry at the time. People like Graham Bowstret. Graham Bowstret, when he walked the corridors of Anglo, everyone disappeared because you don't want to be confronted by the chairman. People like Gavin Relly who were there at the time. big people in South Africa. And you look at the sector today and you say, do we still have those luminaries as we used to? Because those people are very important, not because they had a cordial relationship with government. It was a love-hate relationship, as is today. But when they needed something, they would pick up a phone and can phone the Prime Minister and phone everyone, and they will have a meeting and they will fight it out, and then something will happen. Give you an example. The coal industry in South Africa became internationalized the way it was, simply because of the oil crisis in 1971, 72. And as a result of that, the business in South Africa said, well, we've got coal. Let's go to government and say, you build a line, we will build the port and the mines. And South Africa will make it to will use that opportunity, which is why today we're benefiting and using those kinds of and having those kinds of advantages. It's because of people who became visionary in the way they look at life, and then they were not afraid to take a stand and deal with the situation. I got involved in a lot of ways in business, in creating ASCs, for instance. It was not something that I wanted to do, but it's amazing that a lot of people surrounding me, particularly my ex-leaders at Anglo, at Billiton and the others, came to me and said, you can do this. Because why? Because you've had enough training. And after a long time and after reflection, I realized that I could start an organization. I could put a team together. Why? I had the knowledge. I had done time, and I had the skill to do it. And therefore, I knew I could never fail because I had all those things. And I had the vision, I had the resolve to make those things work. So I got involved in that. So what is quite funny is that all the things that I had learned over a period of time, like, for instance, all people that played a key role in my life, I never destroyed bridges towards them and dealing with them. And it's very important that you never destroy bridges in life, because you never know when those would come could come in handy at a particular point in time, which is what happened to me. So when we created ASCs and therefore morphing into Exaro, what was very central to me is that, one, it was important for me and my kids and my generation for us to know that, as black people, we could be CEOs. 2, we can run successful organizations. 3, we can compete effectively with any other person around the world. And I believe that we managed to achieve that one, because all the things that we did at Exaro, at ASCs, would attest to that fact that everyone given a chance can do it. It doesn't matter whether you are black or white or whatever it is, but you can make things happen. So that was really remarkable for me. So the leadership aspect was very important. But remember, South Africa was transforming at the time as well. And there were areas where when you talk to white people, they probably didn't think that you were the best person. Give you an example. Not too long ago at Exaro, probably 4 years ago, there was a lady who was complaining a lot about her boss, the way she was treated. She's a black lady. And eventually he ended up making statements, disparaging statements against me, who was his boss at the time. So I got involved in that conversation, and I could have fired him. So I chose not to fire him. But I said to him, you haven't been doing good to this lady. You haven't treated her well. Your survival in this organization depends on how you develop her now. In 6 months' time, we meet. And if she is satisfied with the progress that you are making, you've got your job. Otherwise, you're gone. So it's those kinds of things that we dealt with. Among black people as well. There were those that, and they will tell you today amongst union, who never believed that black people could do that one. I sat in one function, and one guy walked in and he walked past me, and he talked to a guy working for Ingwe. It became Billiton. Hey, Mnumzan, why are you giving the business to these people? What do they know about business? Yeah, it was there. So I saw my role as a person who needed to heal people, to heal the nation, to heal my team. And I'll tell you what, I think we've gone a long way in creating a people who mirror or who could be what South Africa would be if we did things correctly. There are people that I met along the way. I mentioned James Campbell, mentioned Gordon Osterloh, but there are other people like Ivan Glazenberg. Glazenberg, I've never seen such energy in a human being and being such a visionary. Glazenberg, of course, ended up creating this massive organization that we call today Glencore because of his vision. Yeah, he lives in Switzerland today, but he still considers South Africa home because of what South Africa did for him. Glazenberg taught me a lot about the business, about marketing, about interacting with other races as well. I think it was really incredible dealing with him. And of course, there's above all that, there's a big gentleman, larger than life, the tower, Mr. Mandela, really. So whatever you did, at some point you just felt that if I did it well, even Mandela would say, well done, my man. Because you saw a man, probably, you thought, not that he didn't have his own flaws, but he had this leadership. He had respect for human being, but he could make things happen. Once he has taken a decision on something, something happened. We remember those decisions that he took about nationalization. He took a stand on that one, and the organization followed him. He took a stand when there was this massacre at Bisho, and people were very angry, and he walked in there and he dealt with the situation. He took a stand even in Buibatong when things were bad there. He walked in. So if there's a man who could walk into fire, I said to myself, well, I also can try. Of course, his shoes are too big and ugly for me, as Thabo would say. But, I could do my small steps in trying to do something. So he played a key role in shaping all of us to be who we are. If you look at the mining sector and just the country in general, the country has to contend and compete with everyone around the world. And if South Africa is going to play that role, we need skills. We need education to work for us. If education doesn't work for us, we will forever be relegated to a footnote. And therefore, skills development is critical. Our education, the way it talks to where the world is going, I think that's very, very important. Whenever I speak to people, when I was at Exar, I would say to them, make sure that you look after your kids. Make sure that they go to school. Make sure that they study the right kind of disciplines, because that is what is required going forward. Who knew that today in the mining sector, iron ore, for instance, if you took Rio Tinto in Australia, you could run a mine producing huge tonnages, over 100 or 200 or 300 million tons, by and large being automated and driven at a control room. And you could never compete with those people, because the market, there's only one market where you're selling all the stuff. And if you're going to be saddled with lots of cost in South Africa, you're not going to make it. If you can't produce at the rate that they require, you're not going to make it. So those things are very critical. I look at the coal business, what is happening insofar as renewables is concerned, what is happening insofar as shale gas is concerned, and all those things point to the fact that your coal business, your coal asset that is sitting in the country could be challenged. So unless you use certain skills and develop them, you won't be able to exploit what you have in the country. Look at gold. We still have the largest base in the world. But of course, you have to go deep. And unless you find technology to deal with that, it's not going to work. So skills development is important, but we must make sure that we develop people who are going to be relevant in that space, because that's critical. And that is why now that I'm retired from Exaro, one of the things that I'm focusing on, we created an organization which we call Talent 10, and it's the multiplication and the creation of more talents in people. We're looking at skills development, we're looking at enterprise development, we're looking at more technology in terms of, we're introducing more technology in mining so that we take the country forward and also to advance the skills base of everyone. Without that, we are dead as a country. One of the things that I always think about, and my biggest regrets that I will always have, having worked in the mining sector, is to see someone dying. So the levels of fatalities, injuries in this sector, it's one of the things that will always remain with me. But I will tell you that the industry, if you go back in 73, where the industry used to kill, we had more than 500 people dying in 1 year. Last year, we probably had about 73 people. So that's progress. But why I raise the issue of safety and raise the issue of fatalities is when, as a leader, you have to face the people who have lost someone. I never realized how painful it is. At one mine at Shkondeni, we went there, and there's this young lady who just lost her husband. Her husband was probably 31, 32, and she was 22, 23. And she had nothing. And they walked in as I walked in. They went to that site, that place where he had fallen. And she sat there at that particular space where the guy was lying, had died. And she was just, I don't know, was trying to collect the sand or the ground there. But it was the most painful, and you're seeing there and you're watching it. So it was one, that leadership has its own painful process, and that was one of them. Second one is facing the cycles. As we faced in 1990, in 2008. 2008 was a very tough year for the industry. I remember calling the team and saying, let's have a conversation about that. But government were good, and they approached all of us as the industry and said, whatever you do, please try and preserve jobs. And we took a decision that with all the pain that we've got, we will never lose a single person, we'll never retrench a person. We sacrificed all other things, but not people. Why not? Because we understood what that could do to other people going forward. Because when you look at a person, you must think of 6 other people behind that person that person is dealing with. And you look at the implications of that in terms of stabilizing the country, because the country could easily become unstable if you have lots of people who are unemployed. So that was a very challenging time. And recently, up until now, things are still bad in the industry, very, very bad. And we are now getting into retrenchments as a result of that. But we try to find ways of ensuring that people are cushioned. And that's the part that is very, very painful. But there are parts that are great. We created a scheme at Exaro, we call it Empower, where every employer, from a cleaner to everyone, would participate in some kind of a share scheme. And I remember probably 4 years ago, we paid out those amounts to people. Can you imagine a person earning 5,000 rands a month? One day you wake up, you earn 135 just as a lump sum, and what that did to people. And people just, you could sense that they could go pay off their debt. Others, of course, they do all sorts of things. They buy cars and they prank them the day after. But, it's part of understanding the business and the investment thesis, which is really critical in the way we do things. So there have been tough moments, like the ones that I've mentioned, but there are others as well. Tough dealing, I was president of the Chamber of Mines, tough dealing with government, and when the laws are changing, tough dealing with the charter negotiations, tough dealing with all sorts of things, including the investor community who are outside South Africa, who do not understand what is happening in South Africa. You find that you go see them once, talking about your business because they're investors. I'm going to spend 20 minutes just talking about the country, defending the country, doing this. No, these things are not as bad as they are, because people threaten you with all sorts of things. Dealing with those things is not an easy thing. But you know what? I'm very grateful. That's the most important thing, that I'm grateful that I've been given an opportunity of leading people, of leading a bunch of people who were prepared to do time and prepared to walk an extra mile so that we make a contribution to this society and this economy. The most important thing is business and business leaders ought to have a vision. I think that's very important, that they have a vision in terms of their own businesses. 2, it is critical that they are becoming more proactive than more reactive. In the greater part of times, we tend to react to what is happening to us. Like when the laws are changing, we react. But we are not there to propose solutions. South Africa cries for change. Communities cry for change. It is incumbent to business to walk into the corridors of power and suggest things that they think could make a difference in people's life, rather than wait for someone to say, now I'm putting the law, this is how it is. So if we did that, we buy the confidence of the general public in business. Then they believe in business. Right now, they see us as a bunch of capitalists who go about making money and not looking after themselves. So we're looking after ourselves and not them. But if we were to be more integrated with greater society, I think things would be better. You know, it also goes with the way I mentor people. Mentorship is critical in this instance. You will notice that one if you worked amongst people, worked among communities. There are certain things that businesses could do at school level, at community level, in ensuring that the country is working in sync. I truly believe that, you know, South Africans are very resilient people. I believe that they are strong people. I think we are very blessed with good leadership in this country, let alone the fact that there are moments when we don't see that happening. But for some reason, leaders do emerge. And I truly believe that we're going to see quite a lot of that happening. If you go back in history, in the 20s, the 30s, you look at a person called Dr. Hendrik van der Bijl. Dr. Hendrik van der Bijl was instrumental in creating Eskom, was able to create ISCOR, was there to create the IDC, the first navy that we have in the country, all of that packaged in one person, and until the 40s. But if you look at him and whether he gained financially, there's absolutely nothing. He just worked for the love of the country because he felt that South Africa deserved to be in a better space than where it is. So it's not necessarily about money all the time, but it is about leading your people to better pastures, leading your organization to a better situation, leading your family to a better position, not necessarily about making money, and giving them confidence that they can face the world and deal with them. One of the things that made me choose to go and work full-time in the business as opposed to becoming just an investor in business, it's because I had done time, I had the skill, I had the knowledge, and those things are critical. And I could therefore go there, and the young generation looking behind me, they will know that, you know, actually, and my son today can tell you that my dad could become a CEO, so I can also become. My dad was a leader, I can also become. It doesn't necessarily have to be about money. We can make money, but leadership is going beyond the money aspect.
Guys, one thing that stands out about this business leader is definitely his humility. Such humility is rare in people who go on to lead global corporations and change how the world thinks and works. I know that you got great lessons from this one. I did too. And we're about to go to the final content piece that we're exploring today by Motivation Madness and Simon Sinek, schooling us on 5 touch points that will change your future, get you to think differently, and just make you a better entrepreneur. If you are one of those people that receive or share motivation messages on your WhatsApp status every morning, you definitely will enjoy this guy. Continue to watch.
So I had the chance to meet with some of the kids in the program today. Where are you? Scream out. There you go. I love those kids. And so what I thought I would do, because they gave me a little bit of time to say whatever I want, is offer you a little bit of some observations for your future. I have 5 little rules that you can follow as you find your spark and bring your spark to life. The first is to go after the things that you want. Let me tell you a story. So a friend of mine and I, we went for a run in Central Park. The Roadrunners organization, on the weekends, they host races. And it's very common at the end of the race, they'll have a sponsor who will give away something, apples or bagels or something. And on this particular day, when we got to the end of the run, there were some free bagels. And they had picnic tables set up, and on one side was a group of volunteers. On the table were boxes of bagels, and on the other side was a long line of runners waiting to get their free bagel. So I said to my friend, let's get a bagel. And he looked at me and said, that line's too long. And I said, free bagel. And he said, I don't want to wait in line. And I was like, free bagel. And he says, nah, it's too long. And that's when I realized that there's 2 ways to see the world. Some people see the thing that they want, and some people see the thing that prevents them from getting the thing that they want. I could only see the bagels. He could only see the line. And so I walked up to the line. I leaned in between 2 people, put my hand in the box, and pulled out 2 bagels. And no one got mad at me, because the rule is you can go after whatever you want. You just cannot deny anyone else to go after whatever they want. Now, I had to sacrifice choice. I didn't get to choose which bagel I got. I got whatever I pulled out, but I didn't have to wait in line. So the point is you don't have to wait in line. You don't have to do it the way everybody else has done it. You can do it your way. You can break the rules. You just can't get in the way of somebody else getting what they want. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2. I like this one. In the 18th century, there was something that spread across Europe and eventually made its way to America called puerperal fever, also known as the Black Death of childbed. Basically what was happening is women were giving birth and they would die within 48 hours after giving birth. This Black Death of childbirth was the ravage of Europe, and it got worse and worse and worse over the course of over a century. In some hospitals, it was as high as 70% of women who gave birth who would die as a result of giving birth. But this was the Renaissance. This was the time of empirical data and science, and we had thrown away things like tradition and mysticism. These were men of science. These were doctors. And these doctors and men of science wanted to study and try and find the reason for this Black Death of childbed, and so they got to work studying, and they would study the corpses of the women who had died. And in the morning they would conduct autopsies, and then in the afternoon they would go and deliver babies and finish their rounds. And it wasn't until somewhere in the mid-1800s that Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, father of Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, realized that all of these doctors who were conducting autopsies in the morning weren't washing their hands before they delivered babies in the afternoon. And he pointed it out and said, guys, you're the problem. And they ignored him and called him crazy for 30 years. Until finally somebody realized that if they simply washed their hands, it would go away. And that's exactly what happened. When they started sterilizing their instruments and washing their hands, the Black Death of childbed disappeared. My point is, the lesson here is, sometimes you're the problem. We've seen this happen all too recently with our new men of science and empirical studiers and these men of finance who are smarter than the rest of us until the thing collapsed. And they blamed everything else except themselves. And my point is take accountability for your actions. You can take all the credit in the world for the things that you do right, as long as you also take responsibility for the things you do wrong. It must be a balanced equation. You don't get it one way and not the other. You get to take credit when you also take accountability. That's lesson 2. Lesson 3, take care of each other. The United States Navy SEALs are perhaps the most elite warriors in the world. And one of the SEALs was asked, who makes it through the selection process? Who is able to become a SEAL? And his answer was, I can't tell you the kind of person that becomes a SEAL. I can't tell you the kind of person that makes it through BUD/S. But I can tell you the kind of people who don't become SEALs. He says the guys that show up with huge, bulging muscles, covered in tattoos, who want to prove to the world how tough they are, none of them make it through. He said the preening leaders who like to delegate all their responsibility and never do anything themselves, none of them make it through. He said the star college athletes who've never really been tested to the core of their being, none of them make it through. He says some of the guys that make it through are skinny and scrawny. He said some of the guys that make it through, you will see them shivering out of fear. He says, however, all the guys that make it through, when they find themselves physically spent, emotionally spent, when they have nothing left to give physically or emotionally, somehow, some way, they are able to find the energy to dig down deep inside themselves, to find the energy to help the guy next to them. They become SEALs, he said. You want to be an elite warrior. It's not about how tough you are. It's not about how smart you are. It's not about how fast you are. If you want to be an elite warrior, you better get really, really good at helping the person to the left of you and helping the person to the right of you. Because that's how people advance in the world. The world is too dangerous and the world is too difficult for you to think that you can do these things alone. If you find your spark, I commend you. Now, who are you going to ask for help, and when are you going to accept help when it's offered? Learn that skill. Learn by practicing helping each other. It'll be the single most valuable thing you ever learn in your entire life. To accept help when it's offered and to ask for it when you know that you can't do it. The amazing thing is when you learn to ask for help, you'll discover that there are people all around you who've always wanted to help you. They just didn't think you needed it because you kept pretending that you had everything under control. And the minute you say, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm stuck, I'm scared, I don't think I can do this, you will find that lots of people who love you will rush in and take care of you. But that'll only happen if you learn to take care of them first. Lesson 4. Nelson Mandela is a particularly special case study in the leadership world because he is universally regarded as a great leader. You can take other personalities, and depending on the nation you go to, we have different opinions about other personalities. But Nelson Mandela, across the world, is universally regarded as a great leader. He was actually the son of a tribal chief. And he was asked one day, how did you learn to be a great leader? And he responded that he would go with his father to tribal meetings. And he remembers two things when his father would meet with other elders. One, they would always sit in a circle. And two, his father was always the last to speak. You will be told your whole life that you need to learn to listen. I would say that you need to learn to be the last to speak. I see it in boardrooms every day of the week. Even people who consider themselves good leaders, who may actually be decent leaders, will walk into a room and say, here's the problem, here's what I think, but I'm interested in your opinion, let's go around the room. It's too late. The skill to hold your opinions to yourself until everyone has spoken does two things. One, it gives everybody else the feeling that they have been heard. It gives everyone else the ability to feel that they have contributed. And two, you get the benefit of hearing what everybody else has to think before you render your opinion. The skill is really to keep your opinions to yourself. If you agree with somebody, don't nod yes. If you disagree with somebody, don't nod no. Simply sit there, take it all in, and the only thing you're allowed to do is ask questions so that you can understand what they mean and why they have the opinion that they have. You must understand from where they are speaking, why they have the opinion they have, not just what they are saying. And at the end, you will get your turn. It sounds easy, it's not. Practice being the last to speak. That's what Nelson Mandela did. Number 5. This is Monty Python. 1, 2, 5, 3. For all the other nerds in the audience. There's one. Number 5. My favorite one of all. True story. There was a former Undersecretary of Defense who was invited to give a speech at a large conference, about 1,000 people. And he was standing on the stage with his cup of coffee and a styrofoam cup, giving his prepared remarks with his PowerPoint behind him. And he took a sip of his coffee and he smiled and he looked down at the coffee. And then he went off script. And he said, last year I spoke at this exact same conference. Last year I was still the undersecretary. And when I spoke here last year, they flew me here business class. And when I arrived at the airport, there was somebody waiting for me to take me to my hotel. And they took me to my hotel and they had already checked me in and they just took me up to my room. And the next morning I came downstairs and there was someone waiting in the lobby to greet me and they drove me to this here same venue. They took me through the back entrance and took me into the green room and handed me a cup of coffee in a beautiful ceramic cup. He says, I'm no longer the undersecretary. I flew here coach. I took a taxi to my hotel and I checked myself in. When I came down the lobby this morning, I took another taxi to this venue. I came in the front door and found my way backstage, and when I asked someone, do you have any coffee? He pointed to the coffee machine in the corner, and I poured myself a cup of coffee into this here styrofoam cup. He says the lesson is, the ceramic cup was never meant for me. It was meant for the position I held. I deserve a styrofoam cup. Remember this. As you gain fame, as you gain fortune, as you gain position and seniority, people will treat you better. They will hold doors open for you. They will get you a cup of tea and coffee without you even asking. They will call you sir and ma'am, and they will give you stuff. None of that stuff is meant for you. That stuff is meant for the position you hold. It is meant for the level that you have achieved of leader or success or whatever you want to call it. But you will always deserve a styrofoam cup. Remember that. Remember that lesson of humility and gratitude. You can accept all the free stuff. You can accept all the perks. Absolutely, you can enjoy them. But just be grateful for them and know that they're not for you. I remember getting off the Acela. I took the Acela from New York to Washington, D.C., and I got off the train like everybody else, and I was walking down the platform like everyone else, and I walked past General Norty Schwartz, who used to be the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, the head of the Air Force. And here I did, you see a guy in a suit schlepping his own suitcase down the platform just like me. And just a couple months ago, he was flying on private jets and he had an entourage and other people carried his luggage. But he no longer held the position, and so now he got to drag his own suitcase. And never did it sort of remind me more that none of us deserve the perks that we get. We all deserve a styrofoam cup. It was a pleasure meeting you guys this afternoon. I was blown away by your honesty and your curiosity and your poise. And I am confident that the future is bright, despite the fact that America looks like an absolute mess right now. I am confident that the future is bright for one reason and one reason only, because you will grow up and you will be our future. Thank you very, very much, guys. You're wonderful. Thank you.
Guys, if you are not fired up to find your greatness, then there's really not much that we can do for you. A special thank you to the Harvard Business School, F&B Business Leadership Series, MoneyWeb, AdLib, Motivation Madness, and Simon Sinek for the great content that we drew from today in delivering this business class for the entrepreneurs that follow the Khoola Biz Lounge. If there is anything that concerns entrepreneurship, you now know it will only be found on the Khoola Biz Lounge podcast. Do follow us on our social media platforms. We are at Khoola Biz on every social media platform that you can think about. Also, do make a comment on this business class and what you'd like to see in the next business class that we will be hosting quite soon. Join myself and Mr. Nick next week Friday as we continue to bring you entrepreneurship content and make a dent in your entrepreneurship journey. Thank you.